Welcome to the Big D Breakdown. I'm your host, Larry Lease. Today we're diving into the latest news from around AT&T Stadium. But first, we'd like to thank our sponsor, Pondex, for sponsoring this episode. You can check them out today at pondex.com and use the promo code Larry21 for 10% off your order. We'd also like to thank our sponsor, Game Time. If you're looking for the best place to get your Dallas Cowboys tickets, check out Game Time today and use the link in the description and help support the show. So let's dive right into today's first topic. 5 players that were waived in first. As the start of the 2022 season quickly approaches, it's time for the Dallas Cowboys to start making some tough decisions. Unfortunately, that doesn't include cutting Jerry Jones, but that's a topic of conversation for another day. On Monday morning, they had 90 players on the team and participating in camp. Now, the list is down to 85. And by August 30th, the Cowboys will have to cut an additional 32 players. On Monday afternoon, a day before Tuesday's 3 p.m. deadline, the Dallas Morning News sent out a tweet detailing the first 5 players to be eliminated from the roster. To go from 90 to 85, the Cowboys are waive injuring Kyron Brown, Ryan Nall, Ian Bunting, and Ty Freifogel, as well as Austin Fallu, if I'm saying his name right. So the question is, what exactly does being waive injured mean? It's a measure the NFL uses to prevent teams from stuffing a bunch of players on the injured reserve. All 4 players will go on waivers for 24 hours, giving any team the opportunity to pick them up. If they clear waivers and go unclaimed, they will get assigned to the IR and not take up a 53-man roster spot. So who were these players? Well, first up, we got cornerback Kyron Brown. He's a former undrafted free agent who initially signed with the Jets in 2019. He ended up signing a futures reserve contract with the Cowboys in 2022. But with a strong cornerback group, it's not a surprise that they let him go. Next up, we got fullback Ryan Nall. Remember when the Cowboys finally made an additional free agency move, but it was only to get Ryan Nall? Well, now he's likely out. Even though he signed a 1-year contract with Dallas, he recently suffered a deep shoulder contusion and has been sitting out. Next up, tight end Ian Bunting. This tight end has been tossed around the NFL after going undrafted in 2019. He did suit up for Dallas last season and made his NFL debut against the Washington football team. Bunting sustained a neck injury / soreness during the joint practice against the Broncos. And next up, wide receiver Ty Freifogel. He's also an undrafted free agent from 2022, but just didn't outshine names like Noah Brown or Jalen Tolbert. He also is dealing with a hamstring issue. And last up, we got DL Austin Fallu. Former Oregon Duck was signed as an undrafted free agent back in 2021. Again, given we have barely heard his name, this cut's not exactly surprising. Just like that, the first round of roster cuts is done. And now the team must cut another 5 players by next Tuesday. Before we move on, let us know in the comment section below. Is there anybody else that they should cut by next Tuesday? And of course, hit that thumbs up button if you like our videos, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell notification button to be notified of future videos. And now we're going to take a look at some of the studs and duds from preseason week 1. The first week of preseason can often be ugly, but this was extreme for the Cowboys. They sat the majority of their starters, and the players who did suit up appeared as though they were also taking the night off. Dallas was beaten in every phase of the game by the Broncos. But the worst part of the loss was how undisciplined they were. After hearing Mike McCarthy harp on penalties all offseason, the Cowboys were flagged 17 times for 129 yards. Well, McCarthy deserves to be a dud for continuing to lack any discipline whatsoever. We'll spare him for now, since it was mainly the reserves who drew the flags. With him being placed on notice, we turn our attention to the players who stood out as studs and duds in their loss to Denver. Stud, Malik Davis, running back. In the second half, Malik Davis was out there giving it his all. The undrafted free agent from Florida ran for 51 yards on just 8 carries and added 16 more on 3 rushing attempts. He ended up being responsible for the majority of the offensive yards, which could help him make a run at the third running back spot. The dud, we got Cooper Rush at quarterback. Cooper Rush was a folk hero in 2021 when he led Dallas to a win over the Minnesota Vikings. And now he might have lost a lot of that goodwill on Saturday. Rush struggled throughout the first half for Dallas. He nearly threw a pick on his second pass attempt while trying to force it to rookie Jalen Tolbert. Rush's pass hit Michael Ojimediah, who dropped what would have been a pick six. On their next drive, he converted a 3rd and 12 by hitting Dennis Houston, but it didn't matter since the series ended with him being picked off on 4th down. Rush tried to throw under pressure, and P.J. Locke jumped in front of the intended target, which was again Tolbert. Rush seemed to try and force his throws, especially when looking for the rookie. He ended the night with just 80 yards on 20 passing attempts and led Dallas to no points. With Will Grier already breathing down his neck, this outing was exactly what he didn't need. Next up, for a stud, we got Tyler Smith. When Dallas added Tyler Smith in the first round of the 2022 NFL Draft, they praised him for the power he played with while at Tulsa. On Saturday night, he got his first chance to go against NFL talent, and he didn't disappoint. Smith looked like a veteran out there as he pushed his defender around with ease. He was usually the one clearing the way in the running game, and when Rico Dowdle followed behind him, good things tended to happen. He was flagged a couple of times for holding, but the calls were questionable at best. Still, he has to see what he's doing to draw these flags and attempt to clean it up, especially since this was his number one issue in college. Now on to the dud. Nahashan Wright, head cornerback. Wright was drafted due to his size in Dallas, as Dallas wanted the 6'4" cornerback to be able to use his length to contend with taller receivers. On Saturday, he found himself trying to high point a ball in the end zone and was unable to do so as he was beaten out by 6'0" Kendall Hinton. At this point in the game, Wright had surrendered roughly 92 yards on 5 receptions, including the touchdown. He gave up more after this as well. Wright even hurt himself at one point as he had a pick early in the game overturned since he drew a flag for holding on the play. He finished with 7 tackles, showing great physicality, but his coverage skills were questionable. Next up, Jake Ferguson, a stud at tight end. Rookie tight end Jake Ferguson was one of the few bright spots for the Cowboys offense in the first half. The unit was bullied by the Broncos as Rush struggled to move the ball with any consistency, except for when he was throwing to Ferguson. The Wisconsin product caught all 3 targets from the starting quarterback for 29 yards. Might not have been electric, but he accounted for more yards than any other pass catcher for Dallas in the first half. At this point, he has the upper hand on the number 2 spot behind Dalton Schultz. And also at the tight end, our dud, Jeremy Sprinkle. While Ferguson was playing well, Sprinkle might have hurt his chances of making the team. Early in the game, Sprinkle was called for a holding penalty on a 3rd and 2, which negated a first down run by Dowdle. Dallas did convert on a 3rd and 12 as Rush hit rookie Dennis Houston for 18 yards. But Sprinkle made it harder on them than it needed to be. Sprinkle did wind up making a couple of catches, but then had a drop pass in the 4th quarter, which ended the positive momentum he had built. He's likely behind Ferguson, but could find himself trailing Peyton Hendershot and Sean McKeon, who had 13 yards on 2 receptions. But but also hauled in a 25-yard pass that was called back due to one of their many penalties. And at stud, at the quarterback, we got Ben DiNucci. The offense was a complete disaster early in the game, and that gave DiNucci an opportunity to be a spark plug for them. He entered the game in the third quarter and started his first drive from the Dallas 3-yard line. He showed no fear as he threw a 40-yard completion to Brandon Smith to give them some breathing room. That drive should have ended in the first points of the night had it not been for penalties and a missed kick. DiNucci did lead them to points on the next drive, going 95 yards on 18 plays, capping things off with a 12-yard touchdown pass to Simi Fehoko. He finished with 112 yards passing and 13 yards rushing, while also showing the ability to escape constant pressure. He wasn't perfect, but he looked better than expected and kept the team from being shut out. And finally, our dud, Kelvin Joseph at cornerback. The Broncos' first touchdown of the game was a 1-yard pass from Johnson to Seth Williams, and it was 2021 second-round pick Kelvin Joseph who was unable to stop the reception. Joseph is a player Dallas was high on, but the fact that he struggled to go one-on-one with a 6th-round pick from the same draft is worrisome. Joseph also had an error to end the first half when he lined up offside on a field goal attempt from Brandon McManus. The veteran kicker missed from 57 yards, but then got to try again thanks to Joseph, and this time he knocked it in from 52 yards to put Denver up 17-0. Is there anybody we missed that you believe would be a stud or a dud from preseason week 1? Let us know. And now we're going to take a look at training camp and 3 things we learned. The Dallas Cowboys have wrapped up in Oxnard, California, and already started their preseason games. With this portion of camp behind us, it felt like a good time to look back at the team and identify 3 things that we learned during camp. Number 3, Leighton Vander Esch still has it. Dallas took a 5th-year option on linebacker Leighton Vander Esch ahead to 2021, which allowed him to hit the open market this offseason. Outside interest was never acted upon, and in the end, Vander Esch returned on a 1-year deal. It was a bit of a surprise to see the Cowboys bring him back, but so far, it appears to have been a great move. The 5th-year player has been more motivated than ever before, and this was noticed by Albert Breer, who called Leighton Vander Esch one of the surprise players in camp. As a rookie, Vander Esch was one of the more imposing linebackers in the NFL. He was also solid in pass protection, despite being built like a defensive end. From there, things went south for him as injuries and inconsistency became the norm. He did, however, put together a solid campaign in 2021, albeit a quiet one. Should he continue to play as he did in camp, it would go a long way toward helping this defense take its next step under coordinator Dan Quinn. Number 2, Dallas has some young talent at receiver. After sending Amari Cooper to the Cleveland Browns, Dallas was announcing to the world that they believed CeeDee Lamb was ready to be the alpha in their wide receivers room. As expected, Lamb showed no signs of this being too much for him as he continually turned in one solid practice after another. As good as he's been, there has to be some concern, since Michael Gallup isn't expected to be ready anytime soon following a torn ACL suffered at the end of last season. They also won't have James Washington for some time after he fractured his foot in camp. With those 2 veterans out, the Cowboys will be leaning on guys such as Jalen Tolbert and Noah Brown. But they shouldn't get too comfortable because there are some young players hungry for a role. Dennis Houston came out of nowhere to become a favorite target for Dak Prescott during camp. There was also TJ Vasher, who hauled in the best reception during the team's time in Oxnard. Before Houston and Vasher broke out during camp, undrafted free agent Ty Freifogel was also gaining some attention during minicamps. He fell to the wayside due to the performance of his teammates who had no problem stealing the show. And number 1, Micah Parsons is ready for the spotlight. As a rookie in 2021, Micah Parsons often proved to be the most talented player on the field for Dallas. His ability to play any of the linebacker spots was impressive, but nothing compared to the skill set that allowed him to move to the defensive line and play on the edge when needed. He proved to have a nose for the ball and recorded 13 sacks, continuing to get after the passer no matter where he was lined up. Now in year 2, there will be a lot of attention coming his way, and he showed during camp that he wasn't about to shy away. Parsons made one play after another, showing his talent as a pass rusher as well as a run stopper. He even frustrated the offense during 2-minute drills, getting after Prescott a blink of an eye. Their recent scrimmage against the Broncos was a reminder of the one that got away, as Randy Gregory was on the sideline for the opposing team. Dallas wanted to keep Gregory, but he bolted for Denver when the Jones family threw some shady wording into his contract. While they're not sure who will pick up the slack in his absence on the defensive line, they should feel confident in knowing they have someone in Parsons who can not only be the star for this defense, but can also thrive in the spotlight. It seems the more they ask of him, the more he can do. The defense might not be good enough to shut every team down, but number 11 is always a threat to make a play to turn things around in an instant. Before we move on, give it a thumbs up if you like our videos, subscribe to the channel, and if you want to support the channel, you can buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/thebigD. Your support helps the channel grow, upgrade our equipment, bring in new hosts, pay them, and even create even more content and even make it better. We thank you for your support, both financially and just by listening to the show. And now let's dive right into the next topic. PFF has listed 2 young players as the riser and faller from Cowboys camp. Just a few weeks ago, we were begging for Dallas Cowboys football to return. Now, we are less than a month away from the regular season, and camp time in Oxnard is in the books. Some players stood out, others were disappointing. It's a tale as old as time. Aside from the obvious standouts like Micah Parsons and Noah Brown, and the disappointments like undrafted free agent kicker Jonathan Garibay, who were surprising risers and fallers from Cowboys camp, Pro Football Focus took a shot at answering this question for all 32 teams. For each franchise, they picked a player whose stock is unsurprisingly growing and a player whose roster spot is in jeopardy. The riser for the Cowboys was wide receiver Dennis Houston, and the faller was offensive lineman Connor McGovern. And to be fair, I think it's hard to argue with either of these choices. But let's talk about Houston first. The undrafted free agent receiver has taken advantage of the dwindling wide receiver room in Dallas. After losing Amari Cooper and Cedric Wilson in the offseason, and coping with the injuries to both James Washington and Michael Gallup, it's safe to say the wide receiver room is depleted. Jones assured fans not to worry because he had faith in his young players. While it's probably not smart to only count on players who have little to no NFL playing time, it's likely that players like Houston are the reasons for the Jones' confidence. Houston caught the eyes of many in Oxnard, and it became clear that he turned into a favorite target. Reporters have said that quarterback Prescott lit up when talking about the tough, resilient receiver. And Mike McCarthy said everybody was impressed with Houston's performance. The 23-year-old will continue to compete with guys like Brown, Jalen Tolbert, TJ Vasher for a spot on the depth chart. Preseason game performance will also be very telling of Houston's future with the team. As far as McGovern goes, he represents some of the fears Cowboys fans have about the struggling offensive line. While rookie Tyler Smith is displaying strength and capability, the 24-year-old has not been showing his best stuff in offseason work. The third-year player got pushed around a lot and even started some tussles in camp. If McGovern doesn't pull it together during preseason games, there's a good chance Tyler Smith takes the spot at left guard for week 1. It's nice to see the rookie shine, but it's never comforting to see a veteran struggle to get back to his game. Even last season, when Connor Williams got benched, fans quickly learned that McGovern was really not that worthy of a replacement. And now we're going to dive into the first preseason game that the Cowboys faced. Penalties are an issue that continue to haunt the Cowboys as teams look ahead to the Chargers game. Whatever the Cowboys are doing to clean up penalties clearly isn't working so far. The Cowboys were flagged 17 times against the Broncos, most in the NFL over the weekend's worth of games. While it was admittedly a meaningless exhibition contest, and a couple of calls were notably questionable, 129 yards conceded on those flags are emblematic of a bigger problem that just won't seem to go away. Penalties clearly are way too much, McCarthy said after Sunday's loss, in which Cowboys' gaffes led directly to 10 of the Broncos' points. Quote, we'll look at those and keep going through it as far as combative penalties versus discipline penalties. That's clearly the biggest negative. It's been the biggest negative, actually, for McCarthy's entire tenure in Dallas. ESPN's Get Up pointed out that the Cowboys have been flagged 266 times since McCarthy took over. That's also the most in the league. Something is not being addressed, former Cowboys defensive end Marcus Spears said on Monday's show Get Up. This has now become a Mike McCarthy issue. This ain't about the preseason game. The coach, though, was quick to shoot down reporters' comparisons between Saturday's flag-filled performance and anything that happened in 2021. McCarthy explained, this is preseason, and I don't think this has anything to do with last year. Obviously, you guys get to write what you want, but it's a starting point. And now we're going to dive into 7 surprise conclusions from the Cowboys' loss to the Broncos. One thing that we don't value enough is how preseason football games can change our perceptions of players and entire teams. That is certainly true for me after the displeasing 17-7 loss suffered by the Cowboys at the hands of the Denver Broncos. After reviewing the game and other media coverage, there are several things worthy of revision or discussion. The irony of the running back depth. With Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard chilling on the sidelines, Rico Dowdle got the start as expected. He has been the third running back throughout camp. He didn't do badly, getting 36 yards on 9 carries, and was more productive the further the game progressed. What is surprising, maybe in a much more heated competition to keep that RB3 spot. Malik Davis was the most impressive back of the game, hitting 51 yards on just 8 attempts, or 6.4 yards a carry. Aaron Shampkin also merited some attention with his 4.6 yards a carry. All 3 of these players could well be on an NFL roster somewhere. It might be wise for Dallas to plan a special teams role for one of them and carry 4. So why is it that ironic? It's because these backs all joined the team as undrafted free agents. The Cowboys have made Elliott one of the most highly paid running backs in the league, including the most guaranteed money of all on his current deal. Yet we see once again that perfectly serviceable backs can literally be signed off the streets after the draft. Elliott was once a truly elite back, and there is some hope he can regain that status with last year's injury behind him. Simultaneously, we acknowledge that his contract is one of the worst deals from the team's perspective of any in the league. Only some incredible foolishness and ineptitude by other teams, including one that may or may not be in a city in Ohio, not named Cincinnati, keep Elliott's contract from being at the top of that particular list. This is a topic that we will revisit next offseason because 2023 is the first year the team can actually move on from Elliott and his contract. However, that will be at least a tacit admission that they were wrong. And certain people who occupy the owner's suite at AT&T Stadium are rather loath to do that, perhaps just as much as they are to part with cap space. The cornerback depth chart got jumbled. It is a clear good news, bad news situation. The bad news is that Nishan Wright, who is looking like a much improved player in practices, was flat out embarrassed on multiple passes. Kelvin Joseph also had some bad reps, although he was more of a mixed bag. The good news is that the team may have found something with fifth-round pick Deron Bland. He was more than solid both against the run and pass coverage. He was the third leading tackler, and it wasn't on longer pass completions either. He also saw more snaps than any other defender. In his case, there was a good thing. There has been some concern about cornerback depth for the Cowboys. Bland offers some hope that is not so bad. We know that Joseph will make the 53-man roster, but if they only carry 5 this year, or if a 6th cornerback slot is reserved to keep ace C.J. Goodwin, Bland is a direct threat to Wright's job with the team. There is zero clarity at kicker. The battle between Illyrium, I'm not even going to try to say his last name, and Brett Mayer basically was put on hold in this game, mostly due to the general ineptitude on offense. There were only a single field goal attempt, 1 extra point, and 2 kickoffs to split up between the two. The lone field goal attempt by Illyrium was further hampered by wet conditions at the time that seemed to cause a bad hold by Brian Inger. The team failed to get much-needed data from the game. So, the uncertainty over the position continues. Next up, this was definitely a huge step back for Cooper Rush. Last year, Rush performed well enough for the team to give him the quarterback 2 job. With Will Greer nursing a groin problem, Rush had a golden opportunity to advance his case. He totally failed, putting up a dismal 12 for 20 stat line with just 84 yards and an interception, giving him a 48.8 QBR. Ben DiNucci may have passed him at least temporarily on the depth chart by going 9 for 16 for 112 yards and less time on the field. DiNucci gave the team a bit of a lift in leading them to their lone score of the game, a very nice touchdown throw to Simi Fehoko. His tendency to go sidearm is still often unnecessary, but his decision-making seemed better than last year. Next up, the backup tackle situation remains dire, but an unexpected yet familiar name offers a tiny glimmer of hope. Josh Ball was bad, but that's not really surprising after he effectively redshirted his rookie season. Still, with Matt Waletzko out with injury, this is really disturbing for a team that has Tyron Smith as a starter. The injury history there is well known, but this was something that wasn't expected. Some context is important here, as Ball was mostly playing against second stringers for the Broncos, while Laricon was up against 3 and 4s. But Ball was out there for 71% of the snaps, so he faced some of the down roster guys for the Broncos as well. So did Avante Collins, who led all offensive players with 73%, and he was not any better. Pass protection is more important for the OT position. This team has to keep Prescott healthy to have any chance this year. One story you may have missed is that the team had come into this offseason with a plan to convert Alarcon to guard, but switched him back to working at tackle during camp. The swing tackle for this year is still probably not on the roster, but that hinges on Stephen Jones dipping into his dry powder and using some of that salary cap space. That is hardly a given. If they foolishly persist trying to find a backup tackle from names currently on the roster, he's definitely a player to watch. If he starts getting snaps in the final preseason games ahead of Ball, it means the staff may think they have something. And finally, at number 7, where was the pass rush? The defensive end depth was supposed to be good, but against the Denver backups, the Cowboys could not muster a single sack, and often had little pressure at all. Dante Fowler looked good before Mike McCarthy sat him following a penalty. Sam Williams was flagged on what looked like a very questionable roughing call. Still, there was just no effective rush for most of the game. That did the secondary no favors. This is a bit concerning, even with DeMarcus Lawrence, Micah Parsons, and Dorrance Armstrong sitting things out. The depth was disappointing given all the hype from camp. So those were the things that were in need of reassessment after further thought on the game. All are very much subject to further revision in the final 2 preseason games, but they definitely need to get better. Let us know in the comments section if there's anything we missed or should have covered. Who's a player that you think we should be paying attention to as the preseason moves on and we enter the regular season? Let us know. And give us a thumbs up on that video. And if you want to support the channel, you can buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/thebigd. Thank you so much for watching and listening. We'll see you next time.